Welcome to the KayaCast, the podcast for cannabis businesses looking to launch, grow, and scale their operations. Each week, we bring you interviews with industry experts and successful retailers, plus practical tips and strategies to help you succeed in the fast-growing cannabis industry.
Hey everyone, in this episode, we are joined by Eric, the founder and CEO of Cure8. Cure8 helps companies in our industry grow and scale their IT infrastructure as well as security and many other things. Eric is a serial entrepreneur, and he not only founded Cure8, he has founded a bunch of other companies in our industry to help businesses scale and grow. In this episode, Eric gives his advice on what he looks for when hiring a manager, as well as how he promotes from within. He also gives us advice on running and scaling a business. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. I learned a lot talking to Eric. I hope you guys do too. You've been in this industry for quite some time. What advice would you give dispensary owners that are just starting?
Know your numbers. Know your competitors. Know your real estate. You got to know your shit. I think that, there's actually a very big need in the industry for new dispensary owners to understand the competitive landscape and understand who they need to hire, what metrics, what KPIs, all of that stuff. And that's one of the reasons Brittany and I co-founded Forte together. We have a boot camp for people that are just getting in the industry to learn all of those important lessons from the other markets that have already been out there. And if you're just getting involved in the industry, it's going to be more expensive. I have a friend that's in hospitality, and he says, anybody can own a hotel. You just need deep pockets and a thick stomach lining. And it's the same thing. You can't get off the ground with just a simple shoestring. You have to be prepared financially to not only launch, but also ride out the initial couple of months when you're figuring shit out. And then 12 to 18 months in, typically we see competitors moving in around the corner when more licenses become available. Obviously, it's very market dependent, but we do see that there's two waves, right? That initial wave of people that are initial licensees, they make a fortune in the beginning, typically, right? Then it starts getting grindy because the price of flower drops.
Yeah.
The competition goes up. Their initial store manager is looking for more money, and then they leave, and you have to train a new person. It's complicated. And so for new dispensary owners, I would look at anybody in the industry. Sit down with them, buy them a drink, buy them coffee, whatever they're into, and really understand their pain for that firstly, the build out, right? When you get your license to build, to launch, that window, so many mistakes are made. So many mistakes. And the more you can avoid, the better. But then when you get to launch, you got to know what you're doing to operate it. So it's all these different skills that are required that they don't teach in business school. They don't teach in traditional entrepreneurship.
What are some of the financial pitfalls of launching a dispensary? You mentioned that know your numbers. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, your inventory and your people and your real estate. I mean, you have a lot of expenses, and then you have to keep in mind you can't do tax deductions. So a lot of assumptions are made around revenue. Pre-launch, you're looking at your revenue. You don't know.
Yeah.
What you should do is look at your expenses and pound the shit out of all of it until there's very little left. You need to drop your expenses as much as possible, but also spend in the right places. So, for instance, having somebody handle your payroll, but you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Having somebody handle your IT, you don't want to do that. But you do need those things being done. So there's a floor, a monthly nut that you're going to have to cover. And all the ancillary services, your real estate, and then your people are up to 50% of what your overhead is, if not more. People is the hardest part of this, in my opinion. People are always the hardest part of things. They're highly variable, really unpredictable. We don't know what people are thinking most of the time. And I think that your initial hires are one of the key factors to your success. Who can wear multiple hats? Okay, you've worked retail, but have you worked this kind of retail? Probably not. Here's what you should expect. It's different. So knowing your numbers around your expenses is the best place to start.
If I was a business owner, there's so many different areas in the business that require my attention, what would be your advice on where to start?
Are we talking about general entrepreneurship or a store?
Just
Where do
general
you start? You
entrepreneurship.
start with your people. Always start with your people. Always. Always start with your happiness of your people. The contentment in their work, the challenges that they face, and showing them what the roadmap is and having them help you achieve those goals. It's the most important part of your business is the people you have that are with you for the journey. So,
But one of the best advice I've ever received was, most likely your people will know the answer.
absolutely. I'm guardrails, right? Like at the end of the day, I'm the CEO, but I'm really the person that just keeps everybody moving in the right direction and removes that upper limit that people put on themselves or their education put on, whatever it is. And helping them achieve their goals helps the business and helps them be happy, and then it makes our clients happy. Having a happy team is and a healthy culture, that's the key to it. The rest of the metrics, KPIs, and all of that other stuff, that's obviously important. You have to run a business, you have to make money, or you can't pay those happy people, right? But
if you were hiring your right-hand person, what are some of the characteristics that you would look for?
So it's funny. That's a really great question. There are several people in this. I have multiple arms now. It's not just one right-hand person because we're a series of companies at this point. And so I have a leader for each one of those companies, in addition to a leader to each one of the shared services we offer each of those companies. And so what I look for in each of these leaders is, firstly, their ability to problem solve, right? Culturally, that's a given, right? They have to be a good culture fit. They have to understand the context in which they're working. They have to understand, the way that our ethics and the way that we operate our business. That table stakes, right? But then I look at their ability to problem solve a little bit sideways, if you know what I mean. It's not, I hate saying out of the box because I don't think the box actually exists. I think that's a mental block. Regardless, their ability to think cleverly about problems and see things that their experience teaches them, their gut. That stuff is the most important stuff. And also how they handle stress. Right? So stress behavior is huge. And that's hard to tell in an interview. And that's part of the problem. Part of the problem with interviews in general is that it's staged. You don't really know until you're in it for a lot of people. But you can tell when you have a conversation with somebody, you can see that there's something a little extra about them. It's that extra that I like. And I don't care if the extra is analytics. I don't care if it's creative. It's just something to build from. It's a spark. And that's what I look for in leaders. I look for that ability to not only comprehend what they're doing, but also see a couple of steps ahead. I'll look 5 to 10 steps ahead. That's my role. But you have to kind of help me get there.
Do you typically hire leaders for a role, or do you hire people and help them move into leadership positions?
The latter. The people that are in leadership positions, one of them has been here for 10 years. Munir's been here for, I don't even know, 5 or 6 years at this point. Greg's been here for 8 years. Like, I develop internally. And I'm firm believer.
So let's walk through that process. So you have one of your generals have been here for 10 years. What was he hired for, and how did you and what was this, what did you see early on, and how did you progress him into somebody that's so integral to your business?
There's 2 great examples of this. The first is one of the guys that's been working with me for 10 years. I hired him. He was in a career change. He was a regional manager of Blockbuster in Southern California, whatever, right? It didn't matter because I saw that, firstly, he had ambition. He wanted to change his career, and he's a technical person. He has a technical, analytical mind and can do that. So I hired him, firstly, because I could afford him. At the time, we were, getting by. But secondly, I saw that what what I put in front of him, he would grab and then build on. So I said, hey, can you reprogram this firewall for this client? We're swapping it or whatever. And he's like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm going to start Googling. I'm going to figure it out. And I saw that. And frankly, he's had 20 positions over 10 years. We grow in a very, looking back, it looks like that. But, as you're reconfiguring the foundations, you have to move people around. And his ability to change hats, we just changed his hat again yesterday. Changing his hat over the years has given him access to different aspects of the business and therefore a more holistic approach to everything I give him. So another person that I hired, also a career change. This guy was referred in by one of the guys that's been with me forever. He's like, hey, my old boss is looking for work. He's not technical, but he's flown around the country rolling out retail locations for major retailers that you've heard of. And I don't know how much I can actually disclose about all of that, but he sat across the desk from me and I saw that spark. And I felt a comfort level in his presence that was unique. I had not met anybody like him and I had no role for him. But I hired him anyway. And I said, all right, you're in charge of AR now. Go collect. And then I said, okay, you're going to hop into marketing. Look at these metrics. Tell me what you think. Build something. And we did that for years. And every part I put him into, he saw something I didn't and something the other team members didn't. And he was able to construct. And he was able to move the company forward. So obviously his title's like operations manager, whatever that means, really, we don't know. But we gave him that title and then I just kept moving him around. And now he runs Curate, literally runs Curate every day. So that's Munir. That's who he is. You put something in front of him and he just goes. And that's what I look for. And part of the problem with that is timing. When I often need somebody to step up that's not ready yet. That's a conflict. That's a problem. And I've needed people to lead certain aspects of the company that just weren't there yet. And I've tried it both ways. I've tried both waiting and I've tried putting them in and applying pressure. Light pressure, not like, ugh. But enough that they understand the stakes, right? It's I can't tell you which one works better because it's very dependent on the person. It's completely dependent on that.
You have tremendous success hiring people that are transitioning out of the careers, seeing something that's special in them, and then grooming them to be leaders in the business. Any advice that you would have for dispensary owners looking to hire their general manager?
That's a very good question. This person, if they're new dispensary owners, this general manager is going to have to solve these unsolvable problems and is going to have to deal with challenges they can't foresee. That's what to look for. When you're looking at a resume, you look at, firstly, why people left their previous job. That's my favorite question. You can tell when somebody's making something up. You can tell when they've been asked to leave. You can tell all of that stuff. But you can also tell when they're being sincere when they say that it wasn't challenging enough. I was just bored. So I got this other job. I can assure you that a general manager of a new dispensary will not be bored. Right? You want to find somebody that has had that happen to them because it shows that they want more and they know they're capable of more. They know they're not satisfied. Now, keeping that person with that personality in the long term, that's a different problem, right? You'll get a year and a half out of that person. And then the question is where your company is and if they've plateaued in terms of their growth. Like if you're not continually feeding a person like that additional carrots and milestones, then they are going to get bored and move on. But that's the type of mind you need in the beginning. Somebody that is not particularly satisfied in other roles because it's just like, boring. Doing the same thing every day.
If you were to name top three traits that you would look for in promoting a person to a manager or initially hiring a manager, what would they be?
So I handle things a little bit differently than a lot of people. We have an 80-20 rule here. If somebody else can do your job 80% or any part of your job 80% as well as you can, you give it to them. Just give it to them. And you handle the 20% of it until they can handle it. So the 3 traits, they vary by individual. It's like, I hate to say it, but it's kind of, you know it when you see it. And until your gut is really honed and that hiring, you know, what's the word? Fatigue sets in, and you know when it's like a 2-minute interview versus a 20, right? That up until that point, having a list of traits doesn't quite work, especially when you're starting something new. I start new things fairly frequently, and often I have to run them, and that's okay because I don't know what I'm looking for. For a new dispensary owner, when they're looking to hire or looking to promote somebody from within, you want that person that shows up happy, that person that you can have a drink with or a coffee with or whatever. You are going to get very personal with that person, not with regard to your personal life, but just knowing them, knowing who they are, knowing what they're capable of. You're going to be tight, regardless of what happens outside of work. Within work, that's your right hand. That's the person that's going to be with you in the trenches. And so you want to make sure that person has staying power, because the worst thing to do is promote, train, and then have the person leave, right? And because it wasn't a good fit, or they're not satisfied, or they found something better somewhere else. You have to know who you're promoting and know that they're in for the long run. I know it's an end run around your question, but that's what I got.
Well, you mentioned something that's very insightful. You generally do, when you start a new business, it's you that's doing the work first because you don't know what you're looking for. How important is that when in running a dispensary?
So, you know, it's funny. A lot of what I've been thinking about lately is succession planning. And we have an internal initiative that I kicked off yesterday in an all hands, that everybody's got a partner. And that partner is going to know what you're up to, not necessarily on a minute by minute, hour by hour basis, but certainly on a week to week, and understand your scope and understand a lot of what you're doing. That way you can both hand that person off, and if you get hit by a bus, you know, that other person can take over. If I'm a new dispensary owner, I don't have a lot of time for that, but I would, if I'm going through a boot camp program like 4K, I would sit in and learn that role. You're not going to have time to do every role at the store, but you should know every store. You should know what it takes to be your bookkeeper. You should know what it takes to be, you know, your buyer, because unless you know what that is, you don't know how to manage it. And management's where you need to be. But in order to manage, you got to measure. In order to measure, you got to know. And unless you're in there in the weeds, how do you really know?
You've done such an amazing job at promoting people from within. What are some key common mistakes that you see other people do, or that you've done personally?
At heart, right? Somebody can rise to their level of mediocrity or incompetence, or whatever the actual phrase is. Going too fast is in the wrong direction is a problem. I go really fast, but I also have a lot of experience. Part of the problem is that people say yes. Whenever somebody says, hey, that job's perfect for me, I kind of write them off. Okay, it's perfect for you. I get that. It's something you want to do. But how are you specifically the right person for us? Right? It might be right for you in your dream. But how do you prove the fact that you are the right person for that role? How do you show me your experience that it doesn't have to be exactly parallel, but it kind of has to be somewhere in that neighborhood? Show me something you've done that shows me that you can accomplish this if given that opportunity. And I think that a lot of people, when they promote from within, do it out of loyalty as opposed to what's right by the business. Sometimes you got to break bad news to people. You're not right for this role. This is not, I do need to bring somebody in from the outside. Or I need to promote somebody else. But being honest and being clear and being very, very transparent about all of it helps those conversations significantly. And if there's no...
How can somebody avoid promoting the wrong person? There's nothing worse than that.
There's nothing, you can't go back, right? You've ruined the resource.
Yeah, you can't go back.
What I would do is the 80-20 rule. I would sprinkle in some of the responsibilities of the role that you want to see them in, see how they handle it. If they're unable to take on that additional scope, even if it's parallel to their own scope, what are they going to do when they're given more responsibility, especially in a growing company where you don't have clearly defined job roles? Right? Like everybody wears a lot of hats early on in every business. It's the fact of the matter. If people are showing you early that they can't wear other hats, or they need help sizing the hat too much and you're spending too much time with them doing that, and they're not able to take initiative, well, there's a lot of reasons for that. I wouldn't just blame them. I would look internally. I would say, did I give them the right tools and the right training and the right mentoring and so on for them to achieve it? Then I would look at, okay, what's their skill set? What have they shown me in the past? It's a really hard mistake to make, and everybody makes it. And I'm sure I'll make it again. It happens.
I want to pivot a little bit and talk about some of the problems that I'm seeing in this industry revolving around expanding. I often see companies looking to expand before they're ready. What are some considerations that you have, or that dispensary owners should think about before making the leap and opening up another location?
Why are you expanding? A lot of people expand because they have ego attached to it, or they've seen that their first location is doing exceptionally well. Like, well, why don't I duplicate it? Every single retail location is a unicorn. It's a snowflake or whatever. It's a unique position. It's a unique company. Duplicating is really challenging. Having it be its own thing is something else. When you say, I'm going to open this other shop, you kind of have to look at it, okay, we're in the same brand, same ownership, and some economies of scale and so on. But firstly, you got to stay in your own region, right? You're going to have to swap people back and forth between location if somebody calls in sick, right? You have to be geographically close, but not close enough that you're cannibalizing yourself. You have to really understand what happens if you open the second one, right? There's always lead time between when you decide to open and when you do open. What's the licensing landscape? What's the competitive landscape? What's the flower pricing landscape? That's kind of hard to tell, but after the first 12 months of people growing in any market, there's always saturation. What does that do to your business model and your profitability? You have to think through all of this and be real sure that it is the right financial move for you, and also can't take your eye off the ball of the first one that's successful. So, and then also it comes down to people, right? When you go from one store to call it 3 or 4, well, now you're talking about having a real ops director or VP of ops over all of them. And you have to have infrastructure for that. And that infrastructure is expensive early. And it's the first thing to topple when the market shifts. So you got to be real careful. That I would truly advise people to have second and third thoughts about doing it before you do it. It can be great. I don't mean to scare anybody out, but again, you got to know your shit.
Yeah, there's a quote that I always get reminded is great sales, mass problems.
That's true. Yeah,
so
that's good. I like that.
You have a location, you're doing fine, you're doing great, sales are fantastic, but what are the problems that it's massing? 100%. And when you open multiple locations and sales drops, these problems now magnify exponentially.
Absolutely. You got to look for cracks. Again, it goes back to that foundation. If you're not constantly looking for cracks in the foundation and seeing, okay, well, this broke once or twice, what happens when we double our revenue? What happens when we double our employee count? What does that crack turn into? Is it a one-time thing, or does it really turn into a big problem? And the funny thing is, you don't know what's going to turn into a big problem often. You know that something is a problem, and often it's like, oh, well, that's fine. It'll be fine. But unless you're being super meticulous about patching everything, you're going to get hit from the side and not even see it coming. So you always have to be looking for those cracks and patching them in whatever format is necessary. You don't actually have to, weld something together. It could just be some spackle, but you have to kind of, you have to keep looking at that. And that's why we're always recreating. I mean, we've rolled out, I actually have every quarter's org chart going back to like 5 years now. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a new tab in my, in my program where I keep every org chart. I just want to see where we were. It's always a
Mhm.
snapshot in time. It's fascinating stuff. I know that's not really, but looking back,
No, that's cool because you know what you can do. It's really good, and this is it. It makes me think of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, what he does when he analyzes a business is he'll read obviously the previous financial annual reports, and he'll read what the CEO says is going to happen, and then he'll say, "Hey,
love
did it
that.
happen or did it not happen, and
I
why
love
didn't it
that.
happen?" Right? Because you're able to see the future if you read the past. What are some key mistakes that you see business owners making this in the cannabis industry?
Overspending, overextension. It's overextension is
So,
it's so deadly, and that comes to that second location.
mm,
It comes to hiring too many people, paying too many consultants, and getting it over their head. I also see a lot of people
mm,
getting into this for the wrong reasons. This is a grind.
yeah,
The growing too fast problem is huge. Not looking at what inventory moves and shifting out of bad products fast enough. Like knowing those numbers are really important. Knowing what your bud tenders are stealing is really important,
hmm,
right? All of those little things add up to success, but it's the death by a million paper cuts that really gets to a lot of people that are trying to make it in this industry. And I think that's true for whatever
yeah,
vertical you're in. It's like, how are you making your revenue? What is your margin? And how much overhead can you get rid of so you don't end up in a problem? If you're really like, this is a really good point you made earlier. Sales do mask a lot of problems, horrible inefficiency, and so on. And then it becomes 20 times worse when those sales drop. There's no writing a ship like that.
that's the story of this
Yeah.
industry. That's that's the story of what you mentioned, emerging to existing. It gets
Yeah.
saturated very fast.
Yeah. And knowing what's going out is just as important as what's going in. Yeah. I admire
Gotcha.
people that are starting out in this industry. I do. I admire them, and all of our services are geared towards other entrepreneurs and helping them grow. Not overspending, but also looking at the right things and realizing that, okay, you know what? If I can't process an order, I'm making no sales. It's worth spending a little bit to make sure that my stuff's always up and I'm always transacting. I'm not embarrassed with somebody standing on the other side of my till not being able to give me a card or cash or whatever. That's the whole game, right? The whole game is always being transacting, always being able to say yes to your customers, and always having enough to sell at the right price to the right people. And a lot of this is fundamental for any business, right? A lot of this is not different than any other retail out there. But, you know, firstly, you have all of these business problems that other people don't in terms of taxes and in terms of licensure, in terms of compliance and all of that other stuff. Then you have, the fact that this market is really backwards in a lot of different ways. And you're dealing with curveballs you didn't think you had in the past or you didn't know that you'd have in the future. And I think that a lot of folks aren't able to just take a beat, right? My walk to work, I'm going to go back to that. I don't know how many new dispensary owners have time to breathe, simply breathe, to think
Mm,
about things from an outsider's perspective. If I'm some investor looking at this business, what am I seeing? Right? What do I need to see in order to see that this is a healthy business? They should be asking themselves that, even if they don't have investors or even if they
yeah,
do. They should be answering this question before they do. How do I know this is successful and
yeah,
how do I know it will be? If I can answer those questions, then the KPIs write themselves.
yeah. And would I invest my business?
Right. Oh, totally.
Do I know enough
Yeah.
about my, you
Yeah.
know,
At
if I had $1 million, would I
That's
invest in my
exactly right.
business? Or would I do something else
Yeah.
with that money?
It's a valid question. It's 100% a valid question. And I think people have
Yeah.
outsized expectations of both themselves and their people. And that turns into a whole different problem.
Yeah.
You know, the most dangerous word for a new entrepreneur is just. I'll just, will just, right? when you have those problems where you're
Hmm.
like, I'll just have the store manager handle that, or I'll just do that myself, you're ignoring the whole problem, the root of the problem, and you're not solving for that. It just kind of occurred to me that, like, I used to say a lot that the most expensive words in business are, it's a write-off. We don't have that here, but we do have people taking on too much responsibility and getting buried in their dailies, getting buried in meetings, getting buried in dealing with minutia that they don't necessarily need to deal with, because they just decided to take that on, as opposed to saying, it's not a just, it's not a, we're not just making do. We're going to actually have a solve for this that's repeatable and scalable, and that
Hmm.
is somewhat automated. And that's, I don't think that a lot of the point of sale companies are doing a good enough job at automating a lot of what people work, what the work is in operating a retail dispensary. They're automating a lot of the sales process and collections and so on. But in terms of operating a cannabis business, the systems aren't really there, right? You've got your financials, you've got your point of
Yeah.
sale, but the gap in between there is actually significant. The amount of the tools that other businesses have to run their businesses on. There's no small market ERP for multiple locations, and you got QuickBooks, right? That's not good enough. You don't really have a RMA system. You don't have a ticket management system. You don't have all of those tools that other businesses do have. So you kind of have to rely on spreadsheets, and you have to rely on fuzzy math in some cases.
What are some of the problems that you see in this industry that you're looking to tackle?
We're going to make it easier for people to operate their dispensaries through tools that already exist, that are customized specifically for this industry. And those tools take many different forms, right? Firstly, it's, how do I launch successfully? What are the components that are currently missing in the industry? There's significant components missing. A lot of it is project management, which nobody wants to take on, right? That's scary, because project management's a bottomless pit, a thankless job, and something people don't actually value. But it is the most important part of going from start to launch. If you don't have a project manager, or you're not that project manager keeping track of all the little bits moving along the line and then correcting, your launch will be.
So in terms of project managing, what are you referring to when you're
So
starting a
there's two
dispensary?
different levels of project management. I have this conversation with Brittany, my co-founder of Forte, quite often. There's the construction project management, right? The build out. But then there's the operations side of it too, right? The construction build out is not surprisingly complicated. There's, you got your GC, and they're managing a bunch of the trades, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for making sure that you've picked the right trades and the right fixtures, and all, like IT company like Curate, or security company like Curate, right? You're responsible as the owner for the construction. And that often completely takes the attention of the owner. But you're ignoring the
Yeah.
fact that you got to hire that store manager. You have to have job descriptions. You have to
Yeah.
have inventory control. You've got to implement your point of sale. You've got to actually have some marketing, and have materials, and have branding, and all the soft stuff, the operation stuff typically gets ignored, or at least lip service is paid to it, and they just say, I'll just handle it. Well, that's a problem. So there's a construction project management, which GCs don't do very well, by the way. They're builders, not project managers. For most local people. Now, you look at a company like Temecca, they do a great job. They'll manage the whole construction project. They'll handle it. But they don't do the operational component of it. And I think that's a pretty big blind spot. And it's one Forte is filling. But it's bigger than one company can handle. I think there's a lot of room for movement there.
Yeah.
But then even after you launch, there's a
Gotcha.
lot of consultants, right? Consultants are dangerous. Some of them are phenomenal. Like, there are great consultants out there, and I'm happy to provide a list to anybody that wants them, that we really love, that do a great job. But there's also a lot of consultants that just don't know their shit. And they'll come in and they'll charge $50K for whatever engagement, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and nothing actually gets done. You feel like it because you have somebody to call.
Yeah.
But the consulting world is tough, both in the pre-launch and then the operational side of things. And again, there are lots of people that I love that do that very well, and I would highly recommend But there's a lot that give them a bad name, and that's a challenge.
So tell me, when are you guys launching Forte?
Forte's been going. Forte's
It's been
we've
going.
been at it for a year. We recently launched the boot camp right before MJ Biz. We've already got people applying, and we're running our first cycle through the boot camp now. The platform has been up for a year, where we have the SOP storage and SharePoint based approvals and so on. That's been up.
Where can people find it if they're listening and they want to learn more? So say that again.
Forte.com. Yeah.
Ops.com.
And then the train and launch, again, we've done this, over 100 times at this point, and independently, Brittany's done it probably another 100. That's happening now. We're bringing people on and doing it. We're largely focused on New York at this point because that's where the biggest need is. And we're going from there. Yeah, it's awesome. Exciting stuff.
That's exciting. That's I see a huge need for what you're doing with Forte, and hopefully the market appreciates hopefully the market one day appreciates the work that's involved in post-launch and accepts that.
I think that it also depends on who the owner is, right? And it also depends on the market.
Yeah.
Post-launch it's just very tricky because people, I think, are looking at the wrong numbers. And I think that pointing a lot of clearing a lot of the cruft out from data is just as important as having a consultant. And I think if they know what the metrics are, know what to look for, and can do it themselves, that's better for the entrepreneur. It might not be better for our business, but that's not what this is about. This is more about giving them the tools. And maybe the post-launch thing is more of a reporting suite and a check-in or something along those lines. I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know what's out there. I'm not focused on that right now. I know Brittany's giving it a lot of thought. I'm working on some other things that are taking priority at this moment.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the KayaCast podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcast app, or visit our website to learn more about our guests and to access the full archive of episodes from the show. Join us next time as we continue to explore the world of cannabis and help you grow, launch, and scale your business.